is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
What is up, people? It is Benny and the Bets, a college basketball edition of the show today. We are, of course, presented by our good friends over at PXG. If you heard our previous episode or you watched right here on YouTube, we certainly appreciate it. You heard the voice and saw the face of my friend Mike Randle, the Chief Content Officer over at Fade the Noise and at FTN Bets. This is where Mike really goes to town. He had a fantastic year betting on college basketball last year. This has been an area of expertise for him for many, many years. And I thought there's nobody better to go through the start of KU, K-State, Mizzou, and all the other teams in college basketball when it comes to breaking them down, going over some of their future prices, whether or not it's a time to bet early or late, and really dissect what bettors need to know, especially for these local teams, as well as the rest of the college basketball landscape with so many games already off and going. You got conference tournaments in the start of March. We'll talk about Final Four teams as well. You got the in-season Thanksgiving tournaments. Everything you need to know about the start of college basketball starts now with our guy, Mike Randle from FTN. All right, Mike, there's a lot of different areas for us to dive in with the start of college basketball on Monday. I think we can kind of work our way from some of these local teams, all of which I find to be very intriguing. It's fun here in the Kansas City area to take a look at KU, K-State, Mizzou, some of the other local teams involved, because all of them have very realistic, not just chances to make the tournament, but to play for contention in their conference, maybe make a run in the NCAA tournament as well. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that off to you. Give me the three teams. Let's rank them from most interesting to maybe, I don't want to call it less interesting, but where you want to start? You want to start with KU, K-State, or Mizzou when it comes to breaking down some of these local chances?
Yeah, let's start with KU. Let's start at the top here with Bill Self. KU, to me, Ben, has a mission this year. They did not like how last year ended. Thank God Bill Self healthy. Everything worked out. But this is a team that has been snake bit during the COVID year. They were the dominant team in college basketball. And yes, they have 2 titles under Bill Self. Yes, he's the best coach in college basketball. Yes, this is the elite program. However, they almost have a chip on their shoulder. And I've seen Bill Self interviews that he really wants to bounce back and make a statement this year. I have loved betting KU on the road. When they're on the road in conference, they've been very profitable, whether they're a slight favorite or a slight underdog. And it's very difficult to fade a Bill Self team when he brings the 2 players that he brings, the point guard in DeJuan Harris and the center transfer from Michigan, Hunter Dickinson. The other player who's the X factor to me for KU is KJ Adams. Ben, last year, KJ Adams was an undersized center, playing the opposing big man, rolling, learning that. He's now going to be a monster power forward, just someone who I think is really going to grow, who's under the radar. Kevin McCullough, Nick Timberlake, the shooter, replaces Grady Dick. I think they have it all. I love Bill Self. I love this team. They're the favorite for a reason, and now they have a chip on their shoulder. So love what Kansas is doing. Easy team to root for. So many great teams in the Midwest. To me, it's Kansas, and Duke and those teams are below the Jayhawks because of their great point guard play in Harris, who's a fantastic leader, maybe the best leader in college basketball, and Dickinson inside, who is going to a program, whether it is Udoka Azubuike, whoever their interior player is, going back to Perry Ellis. Self always gets great value out of those interior players.
No doubt. And you mentioned in your preview article over at FTN Bets that the Jayhawks actually struggled a little bit last year, only 17-19 against the spread. But as you mentioned, they were really good on the road, 5-1 against the spread last season. Non-conference, okay, just 9-10. Again, Kansas, you mentioned that they might be a fade for you in the earlier portion of the season. But my question would be, if I'm looking at some of these look-ahead lines, and again, for purposes of this show, we'll just use the lines over at DraftKings. I'm looking at them when it comes to the early season tournaments. Maui is going to be really intriguing because other than Marquette and maybe Gonzaga, I don't think there's a whole lot of teams that are going to challenge Kansas. I'm not afraid of Tennessee. I'm not afraid of Purdue. This feels, especially if Bill Self wants to make a statement in the early portion of the year, go to Maui with this type of team, with this type of experience on the roster, and you have a chance to take down, as the favorite, what I feel is a reasonable line at plus 220 to win the early season tournament.
Yeah, you look at some of these games. I'm not as comfortable, as you said, Ben, on the small school games. I mean, are we going to worry about a backdoor cover with North Carolina Central? I just don't think that's something I want to be invested in. The ghost of George Pappas is going to linger in my head. But you look at the close matchups with schools like Kentucky, UConn. Is Klingon going to be available in that game? Those are games I'm going to jump on. It is tough to fade in the year of in the time of college basketball where transfers are all over the place, the stability, point guard, Self, Dickinson, who's an experienced transfer coming in, that's an advantage over Kentucky. That's an advantage over Connecticut. Then you're going to have a game against Missouri, rivalry game. Indiana, who I struggle with because they're going big at a time in college basketball when everyone else is going small. So
thanks, Mike Woodson. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I listen, it could work. That it absolutely could work because it's different, but we haven't really seen it before. And of course, we have the Taco Bell issues with late night people stopping by, getting arrested there. So crazy stuff across the board. But I love Kansas in big time matchups because I think they have such an advantage. Not as much concerned with smaller schools where you could get a backdoor cover. Why are we even worrying about that? But when they're focused in these big matchups against Kentucky and Connecticut, I'm going to be on the Kansas side.
Are you on Hunter Dickinson for the Wooden Award at 9-1?
I'm not on that. I don't put him at that level. He's a really solid, strong, top player, first team, second team All-American. I don't like him for the Wooden Award because I don't think his upside is as great as some of the other players. Because again, on offense, he has the hook, he has basic moves, not as athletic. And I do think on this team, he's going to become one of the pieces. Didn't really dominate at Michigan the way I wanted to see after his freshman year. So I don't put him in that level, but it doesn't mean he's any less valuable for a Kansas team that can win the national championship.
All right, let's transfer over to Kansas State. Obviously a fantastic year for Jerome Tang in his first year. They went 26-10, 11-7 at a very difficult conference, but they're losing some key guys. Keontae Johnson's gone. Marquise Noel is gone. You mentioned in your article that only 35.9% of the minutes that they had on their roster is coming back. And you also discuss that when it comes to first-year coaches who have this dynamic year where everything seems to be going right, it's not necessarily a knock on the coach in the second year, but you're going to see some more regression to the mean. And I'm curious as to how you foresee that with Kansas State this year, if at all.
You nailed it. Jerome Tang is a wonderful coach. Should have been a head coach a long time ago and had a magical year. You know, Ben, because we're close. I was at Madison Square Garden watching those games. Tom Izzo had a chance at a Final Four, and he was a little salty after that loss to Kansas State. He even made mention in the post-game press conference. I was standing there, and he's like, some of those lucky shots don't go in. That's a dig. But then they play Florida Atlantic in what's a great game. But losing Noel and Johnson, when things got tough, they produced time after time. And so I just think there's going to be a little bit of a regression. You go back to last year with Kansas State, their non-conference was not great. UT Rio Grande Valley, California, Rhode Island, Nevada was overtime, LSU, who was down by 2 on a neutral. So I think they got saved by getting hot at the right time, and Tang brought the team together, and they had what we desire in the postseason, which are late clock shot makers. This year, I don't know if they have that, and that's my concern. They had a run. They were 15-1, but then they struggled, losing 5 of 7 games in the middle of the season. So that's why I want to see it. I have no doubt that Kansas State can adjust, and I have no doubt that they can actually put it together and get hot later in the year. But earlier in the year, I am going to fade them. I do love the fact that they brought in Tyler Perry, a fantastic scorer who is under the radar nationally because he existed in a very slow, deliberate North Texas team. He's fantastic. But the key, Ben, is Arthur Kaluma. I was at Madison Square Garden 2 years ago watching Creighton when Arthur Kaluma put on a show in the Big East tournament. And I entered last year with Creighton saying, this is a lottery pick-like player who can really grow. He regressed. He became passive. He wasn't great with his shot. He was shuffling his feet under the basket. So Arthur Kaluma is the bellwether for this team. If he can get to where I think he can, K-State can take off and be a deep Final Four contender again. But if Arthur Kaluma continues at the level I saw last year, that's a lot on Tyler Perry coming into the Big 12. I'm just a little concerned. And I do think because of their success, the early season lines will be inflated. Love Jerome Tang. Love K-State. I just think it's going to be a little inflated early, but I have hope that he will get it together. And if Arthur Kaluma takes that step, this team can go back to the Elite Eight and even further.
So to your point about Kansas State, the line does feel inflated, especially to make the Final Four over on DraftKings. It's 18-1 for a Final Four run.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, 12-1 for a Final Four run. But if you're looking purely at just the Big 12 conference, They come in sixth behind Kansas, Houston, Texas, Baylor, TCU. K-State comes in at 18-1, just ahead of Texas Tech at 20-1. And you're right, Kaluma is going to be a fascinating watch, especially this year. And I think to your point, it also gives us as futures bettors to not necessarily feel like we have to jump in early with Kansas State. If we like the development of Kaluma, if we like how this defense is playing collectively, if they're getting the type of stops that they were getting last year, then we can jump on board knowing that we feel secure about the development of this team. At this particular point, I'm with you. I think K-State is probably a fade in the earlier portion, maybe more so to check in on later on in the year. As far as the newcomers to the conference, I think the big one is certainly with Houston coming in. And it almost feels like they're so drastically different from the way that Kansas likes to play. Obviously, two very good defensive teams. And Houston is always going to be very efficient offensively, but man, they play slow. And those are the types of teams I feel like that Kansas has had a hard time with before in the past because they like to get out in transition. Self is very happy with the way of being able to get touches inside. Dickinson can run the floor. Do you look at Houston in a new conference, in a new opportunity as a legit contender to Kansas to win the Big 12?
Yeah, can we take it easy with Houston? Nationally, everyone has been thinking that Houston is just going to become this dominant team in the Big 12. Ben, I like Houston. I think they're going to be very live, especially at home. But let's take a look at what Houston has done over the last couple of years. They have dominated teams within their conference when they're in the AAC, but they lost to Alabama last year, probably the best team they played for a majority of their schedule, gave up a ton of rebounds and physicality and lost a big lead at home, 71-65 to Bama. Then they lose at home to Temple, and they've always struggled with Memphis, which was really the only team in the conference that could even approach them athletically. I just think that we have to slow the brakes a little bit on Kelvin Sampson and Houston just coming over and being a top 2 team in the Big 12. This is the best conference in college basketball, period. End of discussion. I think there's going to be a transition. You're going to tell me that Houston is probably going to be a favorite at Kansas State by 3 or 4 points? That's crazy. They have no interior presence. They lost a lot with Sasser, who is a tremendous player who's doing great things with Detroit right now. I like Houston, but I think they're overvalued. I have concerns. This is not a team that played the caliber of opponents in their conference that they do now. It's been masked because of their postseason success, but Ben, they can go long droughts without scoring, and the athleticism is going to be matched. Look at their record against Memphis. Memphis was able to match them physically as the teams in the Big 12 will. So I will be taking home dogs against Houston as we start the conference because I think it will be inflated for a team that's going to play a defense and keep the score low and struggle to score. I will take the opponents in these matchups early. I like Houston, but the idea that they just slide in and they're the second best team behind Kansas is a little much for me.
All right. So you brought up the point of the Big 12 as it relates to the AAC. Via KenPom, when it comes to ranking conferences by adjusted EM of each team, expected to go 500 in conference play. You have the Big 10 at the very top of that list, plus 17.1. Number 2, the conference we'll discuss next in the SEC at plus 16.39. You go all the way down to number 9 in the rankings. That's the AAC at plus 3.87. And now with a lot of teams out of that conference moving on to the Big 12, it just makes the Big 12 even more dangerous. So let's talk about the SEC for just a second, because I think you can make I don't want to say a definitive argument, but a fairly compelling one that after the Big 12, the SEC might be the deepest and most challenging conference in college basketball this year. For a team like Missouri, and again, we're also talking in a similar situation as K-State, where you have a really good first year with Dennis Gates, and you see a ton of improvement, and you see some really strong play, and now you're starting to see it by way of recruiting. This is still a team that's projected to finish anywhere between maybe 8 and 10 in the conference this year. There's a lot to like about this Missouri roster. Maybe you want to see the defense improve a little bit. Currently projected 79th in adjusted defense over at KenPom. But give me your perspective on this Tigers team, Dennis Gates, and sort of what they might be capable of this year.
Sleeper team across the board. Dennis Gates, one of the coaches, and Ben, you know my handicapping. I put a huge emphasis on coaches. Dennis Gates makes a difference. No one thought Missouri was going to do anything last year. They come in and they play very, very well with big upsets across the board and big wins. Interesting with Missouri, Dennis Gates, obviously great at coaching defense, even though they struggled. That was his mantra when he was at Cleveland State. Yes, their metrics are poor across the board, but They were number 6 in the country in defensive turnover percentage per KenPom. So they do get after you and hawk the ball. Again, this is going to be another team that's going to have to make a lot of adjustments. I love that he's returning his point guard at Nick Honor. Loved him at Clemson. Big shot maker. Caleb Grill can be a frenetic guy. He was kicked out of Iowa State. Very Kirk Kriisa-like with Caleb Grill. High ceiling, low floor. John Tonje, I love. John Tonje, I love that acquisition. Used to be at Colorado State. I don't know if you remember this. The comeback for Colorado State against San Diego State, which was the biggest comeback in Mountain West history a couple of years ago, Tonje hit the 3 to win the game at the end. So again, another shooter who can hit big shots in clutch moments. Noah Carter back and Connor Vanover, the 7'5" center inside, was at Oral Roberts, can shoot, was at Arkansas. So I believe in Dennis Gates. Again, I think this is going to take a while for this team to come together, but I think people are expecting there's going to be regression after last year's close wins. Maybe, but Gates has proven to me that he can get this team together. They have a nice home court advantage. They compete well, and I agree with you. While I can't even admit that, argue that the Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball, the one I enjoy watching the most is by far the SEC. My partner, Gus Carnes, on the Screen the Screener podcast always laugh because I love SEC basketball. I love watching those games. Missouri was a great surprise. So many games, Ben, last year. I remember Saturday morning, you wake up, Missouri's on at noon. We looked at their schedule right away, and all of a sudden, they're playing Kansas at home on Saturday, December 10th, and they're blowing their doors off. Then they're playing Arkansas away, and they're coming back. Exciting team. Believe in Dennis Gates. I think the defense will improve, and I think the offense will come around as the year goes on.
And they have a chance, by the way, to start off the year 9-0 with a fairly easy schedule. Toughest game on that slate might be that game on November 10th. But it's at home against Memphis.
Great game.
A couple other brought in with Pittsburgh in late November. Up until the game on the road at KU, they only have 2 other road games at Minnesota and then also at Pittsburgh. But these are this is a Missouri team that I think certainly matches up well with them. So that first Memphis game, I think, will be a nice opportunity to kind of flex their muscles a little bit. Memphis is certainly a good team. But I do think the Tigers have what it takes, especially in a big home game, to get the crowd behind them and win that one outright. And then that matchup against Kansas is just going to be so fun on Saturday, December 9th. Cannot wait for that matchup. But do you look at Missouri because of the fact that they are a sneaky team to consider them in their futures market maybe on the earlier side this year? I
do. When you look at their schedule, when you have a non-conference schedule, Ben, like that, you just can't get tripped up. I think they're going to beat Memphis at home. No, Kendrick Davis, of course, big departure. Williams inside, I don't believe has gotten the waiver yet. 26-year-old big man inside. So I believe in this town. I don't know if Memphis is going to win on the road in that game. You have Pittsburgh away. I'm down on Pittsburgh this year. Back-to-back emotional games, Wichita State and Kansas. That's going to be tough. But I think that for this type of team with Dennis Gates to have an easier schedule early plays into their advantage, because certainly once they get into the Big 12 schedule, their strength of schedule goes through the roof. Smart move by Dennis Gates. You don't want to challenge a young team or a team filled with transfers. You want to give them time to acclimate before they have the test.
All right, you ready to go a little around the horn and go through some of these conference bets and give out some futures?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's start with the Big East. Marquette, the favorite at plus 220, followed by the defending champion UConn Huskies, and then Creighton right after them. Next jump is to Villanova, and then it's basically everybody after that. Who do you like in the Big East?
Yeah, I like Creighton. They have their core back. Last year they had that run where they had those losses in the middle. Kalkbrenner got mono, I think. They lost 6 straight games. And just a word to the wise here, Ben. When you have a super talented team like a UConn or a Creighton, when they have those early season losing streaks, and I think back to Auburn when they made the Final Four, and they should have won the national title if they didn't foul Kyle Guy to the 3-pointer in the corner when they're up 3. That sometimes brings a team together. So talented team in Creighton has their core back. Kalkbrenner inside, Bayer Shireman, Trey Alexander. I like Creighton at those odds.
All right, what about in the ACC? It looks like it's Duke and everybody else. They're at plus 130, followed by North Carolina at plus 450, and then Miami after that, who always seems to make some nice tournament runs. And of course, Virginia. And I should mention too, just to puff about Mike Randle's chest. A handful of years ago, when Virginia did win the national championship, I was listening to an Action Network podcast, trying to figure out where I wanted to go with some of my NCAA tournament futures. It was Mike Randle the year after Virginia was out in the first round, the first number 1 seed to lose to a 16 seed. You called it on the air. You said this is going to be the year that Virginia turns it around. And sure enough, they did. I don't know if it's going to be the year for them this year, but as far as the ACC, who do you like there?
Yeah, just a shout out to that. People forget the Purdue loss to FDU last year was 100 times worse than Virginia. No one remembers. They didn't have DeAndre Hunter in that game, Ben. And all he's done is start for the Hawks for the last 5 years. So people forget that they lost to UMBC. That was a major piece. Virginia is still a team that has to get acclimated. They were not great against the spread. Kihei Clark gone, of course, just a great player for them. Bad pass in the tournament that people are going to remember against Furman. But Ryan Dunn is a player that the Virginia faithful love. I think he's going to take a while to develop. So I think Virginia is a very live bet as the year goes on. I will love them in the ACC conference tournament. But to me, this is still Duke, clear above. I don't trust North Carolina, although I hope that they're better than they were last year. And I think if Baycott comes back more aggressive inside, they can be. But I don't see anyone challenging Duke because I think, Ben, they will get ahead of everyone early. And I think that lead will be enough. But if we fast forward to the end of the year, I think they can get picked off by a Virginia who will get better as the year goes on. But I'm hard to fade Duke in this spot because they have so much talent. Proctor, Filipowski, point guard, big man inside, very tough.
Yeah, and Virginia Tech, by the way, was one of those teams that I really liked coming into the tournament last year or coming close to the tournament. They just didn't get enough done. But metrically, they were a pretty sound team. I think right now they're projected to finish behind Pittsburgh. So not a whole lot to love when it comes to the ACC after sort of the top dogs there. As we continue on, let's take a look at the Pac-12. What will be left of the Pac-12? Arizona followed by USC and then UCLA with a break to Colorado at plus 700 and then Oregon at plus 900 as well. Any surprises to you in the Pac-12 for 2023-2024?
Yeah, I'll give you a dark horse, Ben. I really like Oregon. I expect them to stumble early because Jermaine Cousinard, who I followed at South Carolina when he was down there with Frank Martin, and the big man inside, Fonte, though they're injured right now, they've been in and out of practice, but I think it's going to be very tough for me to think that Dana Altman is not going to make the NCAA tournament for a third year in a row. So UCLA has some new players. I think Arizona can be shaky. I don't believe in Caleb Love. Lost a lot from last year. So this would be a dark horse for me. I am still high on Oregon. I think they can do some things if they get healthy. The players are focused. They were not playing defense, and I believe in Dana Altman. So this would be one of the conferences I would take a flyer on. Arizona, UCLA, USC, not as much ahead as I think that most other conferences' top teams are. So give me Oregon and the Ducks here once they get healthy, although they could stumble in their opening game Las Vegas against Georgia. They do have Kario Akindo, the great Georgia point guard who's with them now, but they're just a little injured right now. So I think that you're going to get some good lines on them as the year goes on. I think they're a good future and very live here if they can get healthy quickly.
All right, Big Ten. You mentioned Purdue losing in the first round last year. As an Indiana fan, that was just chef's kiss watching Matt Painter's team go down. But they are the favorites in the Big Ten, followed by Michigan State. Another break from them, it's Maryland at 7-1, and then IU 12-1 after that. I'm a little bit curious about this conference as well, because I do look at a team like Ohio State, who just kind of everything went wrong last year, but I like their coach. I like their experience. Is that a team that might be able to turn things around this year? And who do you like in that conference as far as at the top of the line, a team that you like to bet on for the future?
Yeah, I just think that Chris Holtman's going to get it together. They really struggled last year, but they had a magical run in the Big Ten tournament because he was just simply too good a coach. 14-21 against the spread. They return a solid group. Roddy Gale's got to take a step forward for them. Zed Key, Jamison Battle, can he score consistently with a good Ohio State team? I like them not to win the conference, but I do think they'll be much improved. I think it's Michigan State. Michigan State is clear ahead for me of even Purdue. It's Tom Izzo. He has great guards right now. He has, when Tyson Walker came over from Northeastern, I thought he was going to be even better than he was his first year. It's kind of disappointing, but has become a late game shot maker for them. Jaden Akins, AJ Hoggard, Malik Hall now, if he can stay healthy. I love this Michigan State team. I would take them over Purdue. Yes, Zach Edey is back, but Michigan State can match them on the interior. And by the way, Indiana can match them on the interior also. So I'm a little bit lower on Purdue than most. I think they're very solid, but they are not the slam dunk winner. I still question their guard play, even though they were young. Michigan State, great guards, experience, great coach, had a run last year, bad taste in their mouth, good bench players coming in, highly touted freshmen. I like Michigan State to win. I put Purdue a little bit below them. Maryland, Indiana, Illinois, those sort of teams able to pull the upset, but not going to win the Big Ten this year.
All right, final few more before we let you go, Mike. And again, always appreciate your time and your insight. This has been so much fun and certainly helpful as somebody who has been very NFL focused over these last several weeks to finally get the college basketball hat back on. Let's wrap it up with the final three in the Mountain West Coast. I imagine I have a feeling where you're going to go with that one. Then also in the AAC, now that Houston is no longer in the conference. What do you like for those three?
Yeah, start with the Mountain West, San Diego State. What a job by Brian Dutcher. In fact, I put in my preview last year in FTN Betsman how much I like San Diego State, yet I got off them against Creighton there when they got into the NCAA tournament. So I like them there. St. Mary's can certainly challenge Gonzaga in the WCC, but it's hard to go against Gonzaga, especially with Graham Ike coming over, who I loved at Wyoming. Big man inside, more athletic than some of the big players they've had in the past inside. So I love him as well. And your third conference you said was AAC, correct?
Yes.
And the AAC this year is really interesting because there's been a lot of turnover and there's different teams coming into the conference that they had last year. And so in that turnover, they end up having opportunities. But what I like in this program, of course, I think you know where I'm going to go, is Florida Atlantic. I love Florida Atlantic last year. I just thought that they were so undervalued because they had great guards. They had a senior-laden team. I love the style that they played. They could play slow, they could play fast, and they were just consistent. So look out, Memphis. It's going to be a battle, but how can I fade my Owls when they have basically everyone back except for one player? What a year it was. I get nervous because I feel like now everyone's on them, so maybe I should do the opposite, but we're going to ride with them again because they were so profitable.
All right. I think it would be an easy question to ask you who's cutting down the nets, who's your Final Four, but I'd rather get your perspective on this. Give me a team that is getting far too much preseason hype that you don't believe is going to live up to it when it comes to futures opportunities and odds, as well as the team that is not, you can play the Rodney Dangerfield card, not getting enough love, not getting enough hype that we should be having more increased discussions about as perhaps a Final Four dark horse this year.
Yeah, I think UConn, people are very high on them. I think they lost a lot. So I would not assume that they're just going to be able to slide over and pick up where they left off last year. I also expect some regression from Texas. You know, they were struggling against a Division II program in the preseason exhibition. Not that preseason exhibitions are any barometer of how the season's going to go, but those are two teams that I think are sort of a little bit overrated and can actually be a little bit worse than people think that they're going to be. And the team that I've talked about here is Dayton in the A10. Dayton last year, I got to see them with Anthony Grant, just had a tremendous big man inside in Deron Holmes who dominated. But they bring a good amount of players back. They have a great home court advantage. They really struggled up and down. In the A10 tournament, though, they did make a run, lost to VCU 68-56 in the conference tournament. Dayton is that small school with a great coach, a great player, good guards, can make the threes, and had some bad injuries last year, Ben, that if they stay healthy this year, can be that magical mid-major that makes a run.
I'm trying to remember, it was either Dayton or another team in the A10 that was playing in a Thanksgiving Day tournament, and the final score was maybe like 42-41. Mm-hmm. And it was just the most infuriating game that I think I bet the live under at like 91. And it still hit, and the game went into overtime. May not have been Dayton. I have to go back and look, but sometimes you just that's the joy of college basketball sometimes, Mike, is you got to ride with some teams that you're just convinced to yourself, I don't know if this team can score a point, and here we are because we're going to be able to find an edge and an opportunity to enjoy the madness that comes along with it.
Yeah, that's the thing is I'm looking, Ben, for teams that have consistency. In the year of the transfers, time of the transfers, everyone's putting moving pieces in. We tend to overlook the consistency. The Wisconsin is another team that has a lot of players back. Dayton as well. So those are the teams that I gravitate towards because consistency matters because, you know, these games are separated by just a couple possessions here and there. So if you have a team that knows each other, that knows about helping the helper, that knows about where their man's going to be on a fast break when they want to get to their favorite spot, that makes up a little bit of a difference and really can help us here get to the window and get some teams some big wins in those close games. That's why I favor teams with consistency, veterans, and a great coach.
And by the way, it was Dayton. It was November 23rd last year in a Thanksgiving Day tournament game against the Wisconsin Badgers. 43-42, your final score. And all of us, I had to basically gouge my eyes out after watching that game. Like I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah, 4 of 27 from 3-point range. The score at halftime, folks, 23-14. Is that high school? Maybe it is. Oh my gosh.
Gross. Mike, you're the best. Thanks so much for making time for us here on Benny and the Bets. Make sure you guys are checking out his work over at ftnbets.com as well as across the FTN network. You can follow him as well at Randle Rant. Thank you again, man. Thanks for the insight and good luck this season. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Ben. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, just great stuff from Mike Randle. The point about Dayton, by the way, I was looking for those odds currently available for the A10. Not available just yet, but I imagine, at least at the time of us recording the show. But once those are up, Dayton, that's going to be a team you're going to want to watch out for to go ahead and get locked in on some of those future prices as well. Big thanks to Mike for jumping on with us. Also, big shout out to Tucker Franklin for producing our program today. So for Mike and Tucker, I am Ben. May all of your best bets hit. We'll be back again later on in the week with Evan Abrams, the stats guru over at the Action Network, one of the most thoughtful football insight writers in the country. Go over that, and I think it'll be great, especially with the Chiefs off this week. It'll give us a chance to really dissect the NFL as a whole when it comes to understanding how to bet the rest of the season, the playoffs, and beyond. So we'll talk to you guys again soon. May all of those bets hit. We'll do it again later.